Hello there and welcome to Laurence Plays for the first proper episode of this brand new series. And this is Laurence Plays Factorio Planetary Pioneers, where we've added in quite a few extra planets to the standard Factorio Space Age run. And they're all arranged up here and down here with the Stargate weirdness, and so we're going to be working our way through those. But we are starting today on the moon of Lignumis, which is a little moon around Norvis, and essentially provides the game with a sort of an early game burner start. So it's taking the usual burner start that you have in the game and extending it into its own planet. And whilst that might sound horrific to all those of you who've got a little bit bored of playing the Factorio burner start, we actually found it quite interesting. So I'm going to go into a bit of more detail about what we found and run through what we saw over here on Lignumis. So the resources available on this planet are a little bit more limited, or a little bit different to what we're used to. The first thing is that there's a decent number of trees around, at least in a few places. If I go over to the map view, you can see there's a decent sized forest going across the bottom here, but then there are also quite large plains areas that have very few trees on them. And the trees are important because when you cut down a normal tree, as you can see on the right there is an expected resources of some wood, yes, but also some seeds, and we're going to need those later. Over here, they also tend to get a lot of the dead trees, but they don't provide you with any seeds, only with wood. So they're useful for getting started, but they don't give you the means to automate the production and keep it running. We also have patches of stone, which is exactly as you'd expect. This is dead standard stone, exactly as we see on Norvis. Over here there is some peat, and this is important because when you dig it up you can use it as fuel, because thanks to some changes that have been made, we can no longer use wood as fuel in our burner machines. So we'll have to dig up some peat to use in those. And then most differently, we've got these gold stromatolites down here. These are they're a bacterial rock thing, and when you mine one up, you get a little bit of the gold bacteria that decays over time and eventually turns into gold ore. You get some gold ore as well, and you also get, if you're lucky, you get some stromatolite seeds. So let's hit another couple of these. Nope. Ah, there we go. You get some of these seeds, which can also then be grown into more of the gold. But again, I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail later. The other thing that I want to cover regarding the way we're playing this game is how we're organising ourselves on the planets. Back when we played the K2SE run, we had each of us going off to separate planets, and we were working more or less completely independently of each other. Yeah, sometimes we'd sort of ask each other for favours, or we'd do a little bit of help here and there, but most of the time we'd have perhaps one person working on one science tree, another person working on another science tree, and so on. We very rarely saw each other. So this time we thought it'd be a bit more fun for us to be a little bit more sociable. And so we've come up with a system where for each planet we go to, one person will be in charge of it. And that person will essentially be acting as a sort of a project manager for that planet. And with the other ones then sort of going off and doing their bidding. So in this case, on Lignumis, that project manager was myself. We thought I should go first because, you know, it's my stream. And so I assigned a different resource to each of my compatriots as we got started. So we had, for example, Sophia working on getting a stone supply up and running, Mike was working on the peat, Mark was working on the wood, and Tristan was working on the gold. And having a range of different things for different people to do meant we got all the resources up and running quite quickly, and I was mostly running around in circles, sort of trying to keep an eye on what was going on, talking to chat, and getting the science up and running. So, I'm going to talk through these resources one at a time and go through a little bit of detail about how they worked. Let's start off with the peat, because that's required for absolutely everything else, because as I was saying earlier, the peat is what all of your machines burn in order to run. So we need the drills to be running, producing the peat, in order for the factory to have any chance of doing anything at all. And so over here, yep, you can see we've got a mining setup on this patch over here, and Mike has done an interesting thing here where he's got the peat being dug up and then fed down these belts, and he's got a loop back over here coming out of this balancer that's feeding it back up to the top to then feed it back in again, back past all of the drills, in order to ensure they never run out of fuel. So along here we've got all these inserters loading up to make sure they stay fueled, and then that just gets topped up by any drills, or at least on this side it'll get topped up by the drills as the peat is required and is used. The thing that makes digging up the peat a little bit more complicated is it's not actually just peat. As you can see here, we've got some wood coming out as well, and then these belts coming over from the other side, we've got some peat and some wood coming through. So you get a little bit of that coming through as well. And that made things a little bit more awkward and a little bit more complicated when he was initially setting it up. But as byproducts go, it was actually quite useful because we needed absolutely enormous amounts of wood to keep everything running in this factory. And so having a little bit extra coming through from the fuel mining was actually kind of useful. Now down here he's got it as you'd imagine, being filtered out by these splitters and then being passed off down here to go off into the rest of the factory. His second generation mining system is what we've got to see over here on this tiny patch, and this has got the peat being fed out onto a belt in the middle, which then wraps round, going around the outside, so that the mining drills can load up from there, and then you've just got the belt going away, and you don't need a feedback system. So this is slightly neater, but to be honest, either system will work quite happily, and it doesn't really matter which way around it's done. It will work quite well. Pleasingly, the burner mining drills, at least in this particular mod pack, have a 4x4 mining coverage area. I think in normal vanilla Factorio it's only a 2x2, that is, they only harvest the resources directly underneath them. But because this is a 4x4, that means it can pull in the resources from all the way around it and also pick up whatever's underneath the belts and inserters and things around it. So between this drill and this drill, we've actually got full coverage all the way across here underneath this belt. And so we're actually going to get all of the resources in this patch dug up, and we're not going to have little bits of peat left scattered around on the floor that have been missed by the drills. So it is going to dig it all up. We're not going to have send somebody back in at some point in the future just to shift everything across a square or two to make sure we pick up the little bits in the gaps. Conveniently, all the inserters are burner inserters, and that means they are powered by the peat as well. So they'll pick a piece up, put it in themselves, then use that as fuel to power them, picking up the peat and putting it into the drills. Having all of these burner buildings has meant one of the mods we've got, the Fill For Me mod, has been really convenient, really useful. And if you see me over here, if for example I put down one of these burner inserters, then I automatically put 25 peat into it out of my inventory because I've got quite a lot in there, and that means that the inserter already has a certain amount of fuel in it and it's ready to just run. You don't need to place them and then go along and fuel them afterwards. It all just happens in one go, and that's very, very useful. As well as that, and I'm skipping ahead a tiny bit here, but we'll come back to this, we also have the inserter leach mod, and that means that when this inserter will happily load up the furnace here with peat to keep to power it and stone to turn into the bricks, but then this inserter will take peat out of this furnace in order to power itself. So this is pulling the peat out of the furnace in order to keep itself running, allowing it to then take the bricks out and put them onto the belt. This brings me on quite neatly to what Sophia has been doing, which, as I said earlier, was producing all of the stone and stone products at this point. And he set up this quite neat system over here. So, unlike the peat mining, you do need to bring the fuel in separately for these drills. They can't run off, they can't burn the stone, unsurprisingly. And so he's come up with this nice, elegant layout here with all of the drills and the belts all on a nice grid system. Although there's a little bit of offset going on here. I guess that's to make things fit a little bit more nicely. I'm not sure why he's done it quite like this. But anyway, with this, once again, because it has the 4x4 patches, we do have complete coverage here, and because it's quite a big stone patch, there's easily enough stone being produced to keep the factory satisfied. And so he's got the stone being taken out either up or down, so on the vertical belts, and then the peat coming in from the side. So this sort of nice grid system means he's got both removal of the resources that are being generated and also fueling for the drills. As I say, I'm not quite sure why this drill wasn't here and was just a straight through belt. I guess that's probably down to the way he built it up and then just copy and pasted it as he wanted to make it bigger and bigger. Because I think it would work just as well either way round. This is capable apparently of providing between 2 and 3 wooden belts of stone constantly, so that's flowing through down here. And then we've got another splitter down here with some of it being fed into the furnaces to be made into bricks, because we needed quite a lot of bricks, and then another one just producing stone that's being fed off down the bus into the rest of the factory in a sort of a fairly normal way. As you can see, the belts move relatively slowly. They are only 7.5 items per second, which is kind of pathetic, but you know, it gives us something to look forward to when we actually get proper resources up and running on a different planet. But also the demands on this planet are also fairly low as well, so it's been okay. It's taken a long time for stuff put on a belt to get to the other end of the belt, but throughput has usually been manageable. There haven't been too many things where we've needed to put in multiple belts. Sophia has said that if we do want to expand any further, we will probably need to tap another stone patch. There's another one over here, so we could tap that if we needed to. It's a slightly bigger patch as well, although it's got more stone in it, but it's physically smaller, so we won't be able to get as many drills on that one. So it'll last forever, but won't actually provide us with all that much stone, so that's not quite as useful. But never mind, as I said, for our purposes, this has been sufficient. The smelting stack down here will take in 2 belts of stone and produce 1 belt of bricks. That's presumably because 2 stone turns into 1 brick, I would imagine. But the 1 belt of bricks has been plenty for what we needed it for. The next resource we're going to take a look at is the wood that Mark has been producing for us. And this one has been, well, as you can tell by the sheer number of machines down here, has been quite a demanding one. And these are the agricultural towers. Well, specifically, these are the burner agricultural towers that you may or may not be familiar with from certain other planets. And these will take in a supply of tree seeds, which are flowing along the belt here, as well as some peat fuel in order to keep them running. And then they will grow these trees, and when the trees are fully grown, the tower will reach out and grab them like that, and then plant another seed in their place and export some wood onto the belt. So from that, we get a nice stream of wood coming out, and then the wood can come over here and be fed into these burner assembly machines, which will take in wood and peat to power themselves and produce a steady flow of seeds that is able to keep us running. Producing this I've made it sound very, very simple, and in general concept, it is quite simple. You grow your trees, you harvest them, and you get wood. The problem is, we needed quite a lot of wood for this, and so building up a plantation this size was, well, it took quite a long time, should we say. And that's because these agricultural towers are actually quite expensive to make. If we have a look in here, you can see that the burner agricultural tower takes 10 gold plate, that's not too bad, but then it takes 20 lumber, which means 40 wood, and then 20 wooden gear wheels, and the 20 wooden gear wheels take another half a lumber each. That's another 10 lumber, which means another 20 pieces of wood. So we're already up to 60 pieces of wood, and then more wood for the circuit boards, and then some stone bricks as well. So there's an enormous amount of wood. Apparently 70 wood in total go into making one of these towers, and it takes them quite a long time to actually produce any useful quantities of wood. So it was a slow process getting it sort of up and running, but over time we've been able to gradually expand it to the point where, well, now it's capable of producing. We've got 2 output belts running here, and the factory is mostly shut down, so this is now sufficient. We do have enough wood, but it was a bit of a mission getting there because of the sheer quantity of resources required to make these buildings. In order to keep the machine supplied, well, we have 2 belts, one going in with the inputs and one coming out with the outputs. We did run into a bit of a glitch in the game where the inserters will pick up seeds even when they don't have to. As you can see here, this one's picked up a seed even though the tower isn't ready for one yet. And that meant that if we had the seeds on the near side of the belt, then the inserter would grab them and offer them up to the tower. Eventually the tower would use them and it would keep putting more in, but eventually it would run out of fuel and stop working. We were able to solve that glitch, which I think is probably a bug, by putting the peat on the near side of the belt, and that means the inserter prioritises it. So if there's any room for any peat at all in the fuel slot, it'll grab that first, and if there isn't, then it'll grab these seeds and just keep cuddling them until there's room in the tower to put them in, which isn't ideal. Clearly it needs to be aware that if this stack here is full, then it can't put any more seeds in. That is not the case, though, unfortunately. So we've fixed it this way. An alternative method to fix it that we did come up with would be to put in a second inserter over here, and then filter one of them to pass over seeds and the other one to pass over fuel, or just have one of them filtered to only pass over fuel. And that would have solved the problem as well, but I think it was reckoned that swapping the 2 over was neater. We've got some underground belts here, because if I mouse over the agricultural tower, you can see here which areas it's capable of planting trees in. It's split up into all of these 3x3 squares. Each one of those can hold 1 tree, as long as there's nothing else in that square. So we can't plant another tree here in this gap, and even if there's only one thing in the corner of it, like if I put something there, that would then stop the agricultural tower being able to plant a tree there. So we wanted to try and get as much output out of each tower as we could, and so in order to get that working, we've used the underground belts like this to free up this square and this square to enable the system to run a little bit more nicely. As I was saying, we needed an enormous quantity of wood on Lignumis, because most things on this planet are made from wood. So if we have a look in here, there's sort of the machinery we're using. Even the burner mining drill takes lumber and wooden gear wheels, and apparently basic circuit boards. That seems a little bit pricey. The crushers take a load of wood. The stone furnaces don't, so there's at least that. But then the burner assembly machines take a load of wood, and the steam assembly machines as well. And most of those take wood in the form of lumber. So that means you need to turn the wood into lumber, and there are a couple of ways to do it. You can either use assembly machines like this, which, it works. They'll take in a couple of pieces of wood, they'll produce a piece of lumber. The problem is with these, if you look over there on the right hand side, they have a crafting speed of 0.25. And that's really slow, so they take ages to produce anything. However, There is also the lumber mill, which is similar to some of the advanced buildings in Space Age, in that it will produce anything in its category, should we say. So these buildings are capable of producing basically anything that's made of wood. So we've got the burner agricultural towers, we've got the lumber mills themselves, we've got the various belt types, and they come with a nice built-in 50% productivity buff as well. So that's really quite useful. And as you can see, they have a crafting speed of 2. Speed of 2 doesn't sound that impressive, but when the other machines have a speed of 1/4, these are literally 8 times faster, and they produce an extra 50%. So functionally, they will produce 12 times as much output, and they'll use less input in order to do so. So let's tell this one to make lumber again, because we do get through quite a lot of that. And you'll see as well, I've got rather a lot of inserters on both sides of these machines, and that was because in order to keep enough wood going in and lumber coming out on the other side, we needed a lot of inserters. Now, these aren't working quite all the time. The full 8 of them up each side is more than is actually required. However, I would rather I'd rather have overkill than insufficient in this sort of situation. So I just put inserters in all the way up. And as usual, you can see that we've got the belts coming along here with peat on the inside as well. That's both to power the inserters and to power the lumber mill itself as well. And that's required on both belts because we need to power the long inserters that are pulling the wood off the outer belt as well. So that's fun. Building these lumber mills, yeah, so they were incredibly useful, but they're also incredibly expensive. If we look at the price of one of these things, not only does it take 5 of the assembly machines, it's replacing 12 of them, so that's not too bad, but also it takes an enormous quantity of lumber and an enormous quantity of wooden gear wheels. So saving up all the bits and pieces I needed to make one of these was actually quite a major process. It took a while to get it running and to do the upgrades, although once I had got them in, suddenly all our problems were solved because they were so much faster. This was a very, very nice upgrade to have. Finally on the list, we have the gold production, and this was Tristan's challenge, and it certainly was a challenge. At least getting the system to run well enough and fast enough was certainly a challenge for him, because once again, he had the same problem that Mark had with building the towers. Each one of these cost 70 wood and a load of other stuff as well, and then there was more stuff beyond this as well. So we'll take a look at this in sort of gradually. We'll work our way through. So the basic principle here is essentially the same as for growing wood. You have an agricultural tower that will plant in this case, the stromatolite seeds, and you can see them drifting along the belt here. They get fed in and then they get planted, and they will eventually grow into these rocks, which can then be harvested once they're fully grown and output as gold or the gold bacteria that I showed you before, and some additional stromatolite seeds that can be dumped that you can do other things with. And also you get this brown moist stromatolite remnant coming out as well, which is absolutely lovely, and that needs to be dealt with. So things are a little bit more complicated over this side than they are for the other ones, but the basic principle is the same. You plant your seeds, they grow into a thing, you harvest the thing, and you dump it out onto a belt and take it away to be dealt with. So all of that then flows up here. We've got a bit of filtering going on, so we're pulling out the gold ore, which is what we actually want from this system. That's being then taken up here and fed along here to be passed into crushers. And so we researched crushers during the stream, and this is from another mod we've added, which allows you to do a little bit of resource boosting, shall we say. So you can feed in a gold ore into the system here, and then it will turn into 1 or 2 crushed gold ore. And at the moment we've got a 20% chance of an additional product, and a 5% chance of getting the gold ore back, and 2% chance of some sand as well. So this means we're actually producing, functionally, for every gold ore that comes in, once we finish processing it all round, we're getting 1 1/4 output things, and then some of that is gold ore, which can be then reprocessed again. So it's actually going to be slightly more than that coming out of each gold ore, but it's only very slightly more, and I'm not going to work out the exact numbers. So this gives us a 25% slightly more percent boost on the production of gold, which is rather nice because we can then feed that along here, and it can be fed into these stone furnaces and turned into gold plates. One thing that is a little bit of a shame is that, well, we have the hot metals mod installed, and that means if I put some gold ore into a stone furnace like this, it will be cooked down into gold plates, and they will come out as hot gold plates. And we need to wait a little while, about 20 seconds after they come out, for them to cool enough that for us to start using them. And so once these cool, if I grab those into my inventory and burn my fingers a little bit, ow, 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 you can see the time going down there. When that drops all the way down to 0, you'll see that it turns into normal gold plates like that. So it's been added to this stack that's gone up to 20. And these ones in here are also cooling off gently, slowly as well. And so that we thought that'd be quite interesting, so that we can have these perhaps going onto belts to cool down or being put into boxes to cool down. The interesting thing is if you just leave them in the furnace, they don't cool. So they don't start cooling until they've been taken out. So that means you aren't going to be able to do any sort of direct insertion from a furnace or any sort of similar thing that cooks the metals. You'll have to go via belts or chests or something to allow them to cool off first. And we thought that'd be quite interesting. But unfortunately that seems to get broken by the crushing mod, which turns it into, because when you cook crushed gold, it turns into normal gold plates rather than hot gold plates. So that's a little bit of a shame, but you know, never mind. So down here you can see how the output of the crushers is being treated. The crushed gold is being sent up to be cooked over here, and then over here we're pulling out the gold ore to pass it back around and recycle it, crush it again, have another go at trying to make the crushed gold out, or the powdered gold out of it, and then taking the sand off over here. And currently we're just putting it into a box. We've only got 521 of it so far. That's not very much. I think we're probably going to be all right with that. The other byproduct, which I mentioned earlier, and I promise I haven't forgotten about, at least partly because I'm reading from the notes, is this moist stromatolite goop stuff thing. And that's being fed over into a desiccation furnace over here. So we cook that down, we get some steam out, and it turns into peat, which can then be dropped out onto the belt here and added to the supply that's going off to keep the towers running. So we've got a little bit of side loading going on here in order to keep a nice steady supply of the peat coming through from the source when required, but also using this up as well as a byproduct. Additionally, the steam is then put into these tanks, which have all filled up, because whilst we are using the steam, we're not using very much of it. So yeah, we've got a bit of a backlog here. This is all jammed up, and it's probably going to cause us difficulties later. So this is possibly something that needs to be fixed. Maybe I could go in. I could go in and just dump all the steam, which is a little bit gross, a little bit excessive, but that does get the system working again. As you can see, the tanks are now starting to fill back up again, and all of these desiccation furnaces are starting to produce the peat. And because they're producing the peat, they're using up the moist stromatolite goop. That's being pulled through from here again, and as if by magic, everything is starting to run again. So, you know, the system is basically okay. We're just not using the steam up fast enough, which is a little bit awkward. Another note that Tristan made is that the gold tanks are weird, and he's not wrong. If we take a look at this tank, if I rotate it, you'll see that it's got, on this side, it's got inputs on both sides of this corner, and then on the other corner it's got one just on this side. So if I flip it around to that way, it's got an input and an output going across the top, and then a side input for at the top here. So it works quite well lining them up with these furnaces like this, but they're still a little bit weird, and yeah, they'll take a small amount of getting used to, but you know what? They're not difficult to use. It's just interesting to see things that are a bit different with how they've had their inputs and outputs placed. This system has gone through several rebuilds in the time that Tristan's been working on it. He started off with a small growing air patch up here, I think it was, probably because there's a couple of inserters that have been forgotten and left behind there. And then he expanded it out to this rather large system over here because we were getting through quite a lot of gold. And I'll talk a bit about why we're getting through quite so much of it in the next video. One thing I find really very interesting about this mod is that it gives us a completely different pollution mechanic. So instead of having carbon dioxide or smoke or whatever given off by your machines, or instead of having the spores given off as they are on Gleba, here we have noise pollution. So all of the machines are making a certain amount of noise, and then so the further you get away from them, the more that noise dissipates, until eventually out here it's nice and peaceful again. So if we look at machines, we will see their pollution stats on the right hand side. Well, this one produces 50 per minute. This makes 100 per minute. So actually having one of these in is much more efficient for the amount of noise you make than using a large number of the assembly machines. That's quite interesting. The drills are less bad than I expected. They're a mere 50 per minute. I was expecting them to be a lot more, but perhaps they seem bad because we have a lot of them packed into quite dense areas. Smelters are a mere 10 per minute, which makes sense. And agricultural towers are, they're 75 a minute. I thought they were significantly better, but I guess they're more spread out. So for a given area, a given sort of size area, you're not producing as much noise. But that does mean we produce this big pink blob of noise around here that you can see, and as far as I can tell, it just gets attenuated the further away you go. Although I did notice a note on the wooden walls that you can use these to reduce noise levels, so perhaps if we put a wooden wall all the way around our factory, it will keep the noise in and the locals wouldn't be quite as interested. And, you know, also perhaps we should put up a wall before we leave in order to keep them away. Speaking of the locals, well, they look kind of familiar. We have these little wriggly guys over here. Look at that, they're all slithering around on the floor over here. And to be honest, they're not actually that dangerous. If I come over here and let them attack me, want to find me, yeah, I mean, I'm getting some red flicker on the screen, but they only seem to ever have 3 of them attacking at any one time, and I've only got wooden armour on, of all things, and you can see how slowly my health is going down. I do have a pistol, and it has some wooden ammunition to go with it, some wooden darts, so I can start shooting them and make fairly quick work of them. Oh, here comes a medium one, so that's going to be a little bit more dangerous. Yeah, he's taking a little bit more health after each time he attacks, but once again, he's not too much of a problem. Even the wooden darts are able to deal with these guys. However, they come out of the egg rafts, which will be very, very familiar if you've been to a certain other place. And these have, due to there being a little bit of evolution on this planet while we've been playing, these have got a little bit tougher than they were before. But when we were actually playing, when 5 of us ran over and started attacking them together, they didn't stand much of a chance. We were able to eliminate the wriggly creatures fairly quickly and fairly easily. That said, we did have one attack that came swooping in while we weren't paying quite enough attention. And when a load of them got near into the base, they did manage to do a little bit of damage. There was a bit of beating up of some belts, and they managed to take out an assembly machine. So it was. There was an attack, but it wasn't actually all that bad. Tristan says that his preferred attack method was to just stand still, shooting at the nest and letting them chew on him, because even after quite a significant amount of time of that, his health was still over 50%, and that seems reasonable. And so, in order to try and keep the base safe, well, we guarded our pollution cloud, shall we say. We went all the way around the edge of the noisy area and made sure there were no enemies remaining in it. So the question is, how safe will this planet be when we go away from it? And enemies do expand in Factorio, of course, so there is a chance they will find their way in here and start eating things. But to be honest, I don't think that's going to be the end of the world. I don't think there's very much on this planet that we will want to carry on using if we come back here. And I think we will want to come back here, because there is one other notable resource that I've not covered yet. And that is these gold patches. And we currently can't do anything with them. In order to tap one of these, you need a deep miner, which looks like this. And so we need to place this on one of the gold patches. However, producing a deep miner is well beyond our current tech level, so we're not able to do that. And so I think this means that at some point in the future, we are going to have to come back to Lignumis once we've got the tech and the iron and the steel and all the other things in order to make these, and start harvesting gold from this planet industrially rather than agriculturally. And I think that's going to be quite interesting, because it gives us a reason to come back to this planet at some point in the future. I think that's enough talking about this planet for this episode. I've covered the basics of how we gathered all the resources, but now in the next video I shall talk a little bit more about what we did with those resources and how things have gone from then on. So I hope you'll come back and join me for that next week, and I hope you're enjoying the series. The streams will be every Monday at 7:30 PM UK time, so please come along to those as well. We had lots and lots of people coming along to the first one, which was wonderful. It's fantastic to see so many people there. And also I shall be streaming The Last Starship every Wednesday evening as well, also at 7:30 PM UK time, with videos coming out every Friday. So I hope you're going to subscribe so you can see all of that. I look forward to seeing you in a future video or a future stream. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you then. Bye bye.